The girl said only one word, fish. Not exactly a warm introduction. Without hesitation, she raised her gun and pointed it directly at Shangu, clearly threatening him. Startled and confused, Shangu reluctantly agreed to hand over 2 pieces of fish. He was unpleasantly surprised by her aggressive behavior but knew better than to argue with someone holding a loaded weapon. Before he could say anything else, a second woman appeared from behind the tents, also demanding 2 pieces of fish. It seemed Shangu had unintentionally started a seafood buffet. He gave up the fish, he couldn't refuse them, not with armed women popping up like mushrooms after the rain. Just then, a young man named Luo Shinu approached. He reached into his coat and offered Shangu a chocolate bar in return for his generosity. In a blink, he popped the entire thing into his mouth, barely chewing before it was gone. Shangu blinked, surprised. Luo grinned and muttered, "I'll bring you another one," already regretting his impulsive generosity. Meanwhile, the first girl, Yang Xiao Jin, still hadn't lowered her weapon. Without a word, she reached into her pouch and sprinkled spices over the fish. Shangu, who'd been too nervous to notice before, now caught a better glimpse of her face, and found himself unexpectedly captivated. Are all the girls beyond the wall this beautiful? He wondered, a bit dazed. By morning, the tension of the previous night had settled into fatigue. Shangu awoke slowly, lying some distance from the mercenary camp on a makeshift bed of bundled clothes and leaves. His eyes, heavy with sleep, wandered across the landscape. The camp was already stirring. Some soldiers were up and sharpening weapons, others were still snoring in their tents. Stretching with a groan, Shangu made his way into the nearby forest. Something felt off. On the ground, he spotted fresh footprints, right near the spot where he discarded the fish bones the night before. His pulse quickened. A predator had been here. Close. Too close. He crouched instinctively and gripped his knife, eyes scanning the trees. Moments later, he returned to camp where the soldiers were packing up their gear. One of them barked an order for Shangu to ride in the first vehicle and lead the way. He agreed, but quickly warned the man opposite him, "Tell everyone to stay away from the river." The soldier looked at him, puzzled. What's there to be afraid of? In the river? Shangu didn't answer. He just looked ahead. Once the squad was ready to move, the convoy began rolling out. Shangu rode in the lead vehicle, eyes alert as they moved through the dense terrain. Everything seemed calm until the driver suddenly shouted, "Something's ahead." The entire convoy ground to a halt. Shangu squinted out the window and, to his surprise, saw a deer standing directly in the path. Soldiers leapt from their vehicles, weapons at the ready. But the deer didn't move. It just stood there, unmoving, staring them down like it owned the road. Over the radio, the lead commander ordered, "Nobody move. Don't shoot. Do not provoke it." Someone muttered, relieved, "It's just a herbivore." That thought didn't age well. As soon as a soldier approached, the deer charged, straight at the group with terrifying speed. The driver of the lead car swerved hard, barely dodging the creature. But the second vehicle wasn't so lucky. The deer's massive antlers slammed into it with bone-jarring force, lifting the front of the car off the ground. Shangu watched in shock as the beast reared its head and flipped the car. Gunfire rang out as the soldiers opened fire, but the deer vanished into the forest, wounded but not dead. The dust settled. Soldiers scrambled out of their vehicles, shaken. Shangu noticed that Yang Xiao Jin hadn't fired a single shot. She stood calmly, almost aloof, as if the chaos hadn't touched her at all. One soldier was injured, lying beside the overturned car. "Help him," a voice called to Shangu. He walked over, unhurried, and knelt by the man. After a quick check, he concluded the injury was just a scratch. Nothing serious. Meanwhile, the soldiers inspected the wrecked vehicle. It was totaled, no chance of repair. With no time to waste, the survivors crammed into the remaining cars and prepared to move out. As the convoy rolled forward again, a voice grumbled from the back, "Why is Shangu still riding in the front?" "They moved me back." Before he could finish his complaint, the man grabbed his neck with a sudden gasp and collapsed to the ground. Everyone froze. Soldiers rushed over. They inspected the car, confused. There was no sign of an attack, no visible threat. A nearby soldier checked the fallen man's pulse and looked up grimly. "He's not breathing." The group fell silent. Shangu stood still, eyes fixed on the lifeless body. Cold dread crept over him. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. And he had no idea what was coming next. The soldier who had been standing next to the deceased man tried to explain what he saw, but no one could make much sense of it. As tension thickened in the air, a strange sound echoed from deep within the forest. Everyone froze. It was too loud and too unnatural to ignore. Whispers spread quickly. There was something out there. One soldier, clearly unnerved, suggested that they should call off the mission and turn back. "It's getting too dangerous," he said. But the senior officer, firm and unyielding, snapped back, "We have our orders. We complete them, or we don't come back at all." Before the argument could escalate, Luo Xinu, who had been quietly observing the commotion, interjected, "Enough bickering. Let's just get out of this cursed forest." She threw a glance at Shangu and added with dry sarcasm, "You ride in the back this time. Try not to attract any more wildlife." As the soldiers prepared to move out, they examined the body of the dead soldier one more time. That's when they noticed it, a small, almost invisible bee sting lodged in his neck. Shangu frowned. He wasn't a medical expert, but it seemed far-fetched that a grown man could drop dead from just bee venom. Back at the vehicles, some of the soldiers called out for Shangu. He responded that he was coming and began walking back. The soldier's body was zipped into a bag and loaded into the truck, right next to where Shangu would be sitting. This didn't seem to bother him in the slightest. He helped himself to the military's food supplies, chewing contentedly while staring into space. The soldiers heard him talking to himself in the back and exchanged glances. "I'm telling you," one of them whispered. "There's something off about that guy." Another soldier broke the silence with a strange observation, "Why is it getting hotter the further north we go?" The temperature was rising, noticeably. By late the next day, the convoy reached a mountain range veiled in dust and smoke, its peaks still faintly glowing under the fading light. The soldiers disembarked at the base of the mountains, tired and weary. One man suddenly pointed upward. "Look! There's something written up there." They all looked up. Before them stood a massive stone slab, weathered by time but unmistakable in its message, "Better not to enter here alive." The soldiers stared at the message in stunned silence. Who had carved this ominous warning? One of them turned to Shangu, who stood at a distance, gazing up at the stone. "Did you know about this?" the soldier asked. Shangu shook his head. "No. This wasn't here last year." The atmosphere shifted. Suspicion filled the air. "Why were you here last year?" another soldier asked, stepping forward with a narrowed gaze. When Shangu hesitated, one soldier raised his gun. Shangu raised his hands, exasperated. "What do you want me to say?" "I'm too short to leave a message that high up." He quickly explained that he had been chased by wolves last year and had run deep into the forest. "They weren't after me, exactly, I just happened to be nearby." The memory hit him in flashes, running through the trees, heart pounding, unsure if he would survive. The wolves had only stopped chasing him once he entered the canyon known as the Howling Wind. The sound of that name alone quieted the crowd. "You hid there?" one soldier asked. "For how long?" 2 days, Shangu replied. "I don't know what's deeper inside, and I didn't want to find out." A heavy silence followed. Then someone speculated, maybe the warning was left by someone with superpowers. Another soldier immediately scoffed. "Enough with the fairy tales. This is a top military operation. You want to survive, stop acting like we're in a comic book." Shangu, meanwhile, took quiet note of how disorganized this so-called private army really was. Just then, another strange sound broke through the heavy silence, this one coming from the rear of the convoy. Weapons were drawn instantly. 2 soldiers rushed to the noise and fired several bursts at the presumed threat. When the dust settled, the terrifying intruder turned out to be a mouse. A tiny, hungry mouse nibbling at their food supplies. The silence that followed was long and awkward. Suddenly, one of the soldiers called out, his voice tight with shock. "Shangu, come here." "Where's the body?" Shangu blinked. "What do you mean, where's the body?" They rushed to the truck. The corpse bag, gone. Vanished. The vehicle was empty. Another soldier spun on Shangu, interrogating him with wide eyes. "What happened to it?" "I don't know," Shangu said honestly, still scanning the interior. "I was sitting right next to it." Fear now gripped the camp. The soldier who had earlier pushed for a retreat raised his voice again, more urgently this time. "We need to turn back, now. This place isn't right." This time, the commanding officer hesitated. The certainty in his eyes wavered. He gathered the soldiers around him and took a long The soldiers discussed the situation in hushed, tense voices. Everything was on the table, the ominous inscription carved into the cobblestone, the mysterious death of one of their own, and the unseen dangers lurking in the forest. No one had answers. Only more questions. Breaking the uneasy silence, the blue-haired girl adjusted her glasses and calmly said, "Honestly, I think the forest is safer than that canyon. At least we know what's here, sort of." Her voice was cool and measured, a stark contrast to the rising anxiety around her. The commander wiped sweat from his brow, clearly overwhelmed by the pressure. Seeing this, the girl offered him a steadying look. "Relax. If it's your position in this private army that's worrying you, I'll help you get transferred out once we're back beyond the wall." Although that wasn't exactly what the commander was fretting over, he gave a slight nod. "Thanks," he muttered, accepting her reassurance more than her offer. After weighing everything carefully, he finally made his decision. "We rest here for the night," he declared. "At dawn, we return behind the wall. Going forward now, it's too risky." As the group began settling down, Shangu climbed atop one of the cars, scanning the horizon. That's when he saw it, a faint silhouette in the distance, barely visible against the darkening sky. His face paled. Squinting hard, he focused. A wolf. White fur, blue eyes. And it was grinning at him. Heart pounding, he shouted down to the others, "Wolves! Everyone to the gorge! Now!" Gasps and chaos followed his cry. One soldier shouted back in protest, "Are you crazy? We'll be torn apart in the gorge." But Shangu was already leaping from vehicle to vehicle, frantically urging the soldiers to move. "If we don't run, we die here." He ducked and scooped up the dead mouse from earlier, the one the soldiers had riddled with bullets. At the same moment, the first of the wolves emerged from the tree line, snarling, savage, and not alone. The pack charged. Without hesitation, the wolves descended on the soldiers, attacking with terrifying speed and brutality. Screams filled the air. One beast lunged straight at Shangu. He barely managed to leap from the back of the car and roll to the side before it could sink its teeth into him. Nearby, a soldier was pounding on a car door, trying to get in. "Open up! Let me in!" But the soldier inside shouted back in panic, "We need to go. Now!" The vehicle surged forward. The man outside was dragged down by a wolf, his screams echoing horribly across the clearing. His shrieks of pain chilled everyone to the bone. Shangu sprinted after the moving convoy, trying to catch up on foot, desperate to reach the gorge. Just then, a second vehicle swerved beside him and braked hard. He looked up to see Yang Xiaojin, still as cool as ever, leaning out with her gun pointed, not at him, but at the driver. "Get in," she ordered flatly, extending her hand. Shangu blinked. "Are you threatening him?" She said nothing, but when she pulled out a second pistol and casually aimed it at him, he understood. All right. No need to be so welcoming," he muttered, jumping into the car. Moments later, 3 vehicles broke off from the larger convoy and sped into the gorge, barely escaping the wolf pack. Blooded and snarling, the wolves watched the survivors go, their glowing blue eyes tracking every movement before, one by one, they slowly turned and slinked away. Inside the gorge, the shaken soldiers began to catch their breath. One of them looked at Shangu and finally admitted, "You didn't lie to us." Another pointed at the rat carcass in his hand. "But why'd you bring that?" Shangu replied dryly, "Food still in the back of the truck. It's this or nothing." Suddenly, something flashed past Shangu's face. A knife whistled through the air and landed with a thunk, straight into the rat's body. The girl in the elaborate hood, one of the few who hadn't panicked, smirked and offered, "Share the food with me, and you can borrow my knife. Or I could just keep it." Shangu grinned. That moment of levity vanished in an instant when a loud thud shook the ground. Everyone turned. The massive body of a giant spider dropped from above. Yang Xiaojin immediately raised her pistol and aimed at the twitching legs. Then the sky darkened. Looking up, the soldiers saw a horrifying sight, hundreds, maybe thousands, of spiders pouring down the canyon walls. The horde was endless, crawling toward them with terrifying speed and intent. Shangu's instincts kicked in. "Run," he shouted at the top of his lungs. One of the officers grabbed his arm. "You! Help at least 10 people get out of the ravine." But Shangu hesitated, frozen in the moment. His mind raced, the spiders closing in, the fate of everyone teetering on his next decision. The soldiers barely have time to catch their breath before a new horror descends from above. A monstrous spider